And it goes, Steve. Thank you. We now have a Fox News alert for you. President Obama set to meet with civil rights leaders at the White House today to address the ongoing violence in Ferguson, Missouri, in the wake of a grand jury's decision not to prosecute a police officer, Darren Wilson, in the death of Michael Brown. Joining me now, Crystal Wright, editor of the Black Conservative Black Chick. Good morning to you, Crystal. Always great to have you here. This is an important day. We have the president meeting in the Oval Office to talk about relationships between police and civilians as it relates to Ferguson and across the nation. And then you have Al Sharpton, the Reverend, actually yesterday at a church over the weekend saying this.
You don't judge the fight on one round. Even if we get knocked down, we get up and go to the corner and come out fighting the next round. You won the first round, Mr. Prosecutor, but don't cut your gloves off, because the fight's not over. Justice will come to Ferguson.
So you have the president and the White House trying to make things better, and they have Al Sharpton right there seeming to inflame, according to many. What's your take on that, Crystal?
Well, isn't it interesting, Elizabeth, that justice indeed was served? And here we have Al Sharpton on Sunday, a day of worship for Christians all over this country, inciting more lawlessness. And I think Black Americans need to really ask themselves, who benefits when Al Sharpton comes in to an environment and a city with trumped up racist charges? Al Sharpton throws bombs, he walks away, then agitators leave towns in ruins like what we see in Ferguson. And you know who loses? The Black residents of Ferguson lose. Blacks lose every time. You know who wins? Al Sharpton.
After today's meeting in the White House, some of them occurring right in the Oval Office with the president, civil writers will gather and civil rights leaders and actually try to come up with a plan for peace. Do you expect this to change, or do you expect more from Al Sharpton?
Well, I have a real big problem with President Obama meeting with, quote, civil rights leaders. I'm a Black woman, Elizabeth. None of these so-called civil rights leaders the president is meeting with are leaders to me. And we are not in 1964 anymore. I'd rather see the president come out, give a speech to the American people, and talk about this transformative healing that he ran on in 2008. Every time we turn around, we have more people within his administration pitting whites against blacks. And I think it's got to stop. He needs to rebuke Al Sharpton, who's not a reverend, he's not a healer. He is a disgusting example of what this whole, what I would say, this underbelly of Black culture has become. And it's really being instigated by people like Al Sharpton, who, by the way, has a platform on another network that I'm not going to mention.
I'm sure that if the president mentioned to Al Sharpton, the Reverend, to stop doing what he would do today or tomorrow, the next day, then he would. And we'll see if that happens. I want to ask you about Eric Holder. Okay, he's set to kind of take a tour across the nation to discuss Ferguson, race relations, and policing in those areas. The Justice Department, though, is conducting a civil rights investigation into the Brown shooting, separately probe the police department and their practices. So, is he the person to be going place to place, starting in Atlanta today, to talk to really young Americans about these relationships?
Well, isn't it interesting that Eric Holder was one of the first people, along with President Obama, to weigh in on the Trayvon Martin shooting, weigh in on the side of Trayvon Martin and his family before the facts were in. Same thing we saw with Eric Holder and the Michael Brown case. I think he's the absolute wrong person to go down and try to have any real honest discussion on race relations. And isn't it interesting that Eric Holder is going down to Atlanta? He's going to speak tonight at I think it's an all-Black church, Elizabeth. And how is that going to heal things? Okay, again, we're dividing whites against blacks. If he's really interested in an honest discussion about race and really what's going on, I think white people need to be at the table. I think Hispanic people need to be at the table. But more importantly, all this is doing, this is just placating the majority of Black Americans who voted for President Obama. This is just continuing to fuel the riots, and people like Al Sharpton who feel justice wasn't served in Ferguson. Justice was indeed served in Ferguson. And we need to really, if Eric Holder wants to be honest about what's going on in Black communities and policing, really the epidemic is blacks killing other blacks. It's not white cops waking up every morning gunning for young Black kids.
Right, we certainly see those numbers in Chicago. We talked about them last week. Crystal Wright, we always appreciate your input here and insight into this ever-present discussion. One that's causing a lot of unrest across the nation. Thanks for being with us.
I can't hear.